Hello and welcome to Spirit Insight. I am Lorelei Drock. Today we have Peter Panagore. He is going to share his story and the uh, the story of his NDEs and how he came to that point and how he has changed since. So we're so happy to have you here today, Peter.
Thanks for having me. Very glad to be here.
You're welcome. Peter is, like I said, a two-time near-death experiencer. He earned his Bachelor of Arts degree in English Literature and earned his Master's of Divinity at Yale, focusing on Western mysticism. And I'm looking forward to hearing more about that, Peter. Peter is an international Audible best-selling author of Heaven is Beautiful, Dying Taught Me That Death is Just the Beginning. His bio will be listed below so you can contact him and see what other projects and writings he has for you. Again, thank you for being here today, Peter.
Thanks for having me. Super happy to be here, Lorelei.
And I just want to preface this before your experiences growing up. How was your childhood? I mean, did you already have some gifts, some maybe spiritual experiences that led up to your two near-death experiences? Can you just tell me a little bit about that and like maybe what faith and spiritual aspects you had already growing up?
Sure, happy to. So I didn't know where the spiritual experiences were leading because I couldn't see forward. I could only see after my NDE that the series that I had that began when I was 5 will set me up. And so when I was 5 years old, I had my first rapture, out of body, angelic being come and carrying me into a divine heaven where I could see my physical body, but I had traveled up the silver cord, up the elevator, and the divine had come to me and taken me to itself into the void and contained me inside a sphere like a room, a heaven to myself that was made out of the angel who came to collect me. And I could see through it, and it was only darkness, and as far as I could see. And then it opened up some, and in poured the darkness into this space and took on a personality, a character, but it kept shifting. It was very fluid from one form to another. So many forms, a million forms in a row, just moving and moving and moving, and spoke to me and said to me, non-linguistically, no language download, says to me, "What about our deal?" and, and then I get sucked out of this sphere and I get brought into this infinite void. And I remember myself. I remember the divine. I remember myself as a pre-existent being. And then I got funneled back into the sphere, and I could see when I was outside and inside the sphere, I had some kind of form to me. I wasn't just energy. I had a shape, and I could see my body down the cable, and I knew that I was there, and I knew that I was here, and I knew that down the below was not me, that this is the true me. And after I had been out into the void in the experience of the eternal, but in a limited way, I understood, oh yeah, I got the deal. I remember now, I'm in. And boom, I get sent back down. And that's the bare bones of that. About a year later, when I was 6, I was set to bed with the door open a crack because I was afraid of, the dark. And because I had seen an entity in my closet, a white being with the closet door was open, and there was a being in the closet that was see-through, and it was in my clothes, and it was humanoid shaped, and it was non-threatening, but I felt scared. But it was completely non-threatening. So the closet door is shut, the bedroom door is open a crack. My baby brother, who I love with all my heart, but at the time he was brand new, and he had moved into my small room with his crib, and I was upset. And that this same day, my dad had run over my dog. My parents had gotten me a dog to compensate for the new baby brother. And that day I was in my bedroom, and I was looking out the window down into the driveway, and my dad was screaming and screaming, and he had my dog in his arms, and the dog had fallen asleep, and my dad had run him over. So I had this very traumatic, all this is all at once. the guy in the closet had been like the week before. Then my brother moves into the room, and then my dad runs over my dog, and I'm bereft and lost. And so the doors open a crack, and I fall asleep, and I hear my name being called, Peter, 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 just repeated over and over. And I wake up, and I know this voice. I know this voice. And so I sit up in bed, and I turn, and there's the crib, and I can see my baby brother asleep, but the room is sepia tone. And so I can see I can see in the room, but it's not actually sepia tone, and there are no lights on in the place. And my parents had closed the door because I had fallen asleep, but I could see, and my name is being called. And so I stand up from the bed to go investigate, because I know this name, and it's so loving, this voice, and it's so loving. And I stand up, and as I stand up, I feel weird. And I look down at my feet, and my feet are not on the floor. And I look back in the bed, and there's a boy in the bed, and I know that it's me, and it's not me. And now I recognize this voice as the same voice that had carried me into the divine, of it's different volume, different tenor, different tone, same voice. And I go to the door, I float to the door, and the voice is, come through the door, come through the door. You can see me. I can't see it. It's come to the door. It's like I reach for the door handle, and my hand goes through the door handle. And it says, just walk through the wood. And so I float through the wood. I pass through the wood, and I get to the top of the stairs, and there's a turn in the stairs, a little landing. And on the landing is an elephant. And this is a small elephant, my-sized elephant, but it's ancient. It's an ancient elephant, and it's dressed in India like elephant clothes. And okay, so I'm a 6-year-old kid. I live outside of Boston. I was raised Greek Orthodox and Roman Catholic. I knew nothing of India. Okay, nothing of India. And I was raised in the two churches simultaneously, because dad's Greek Orthodox, mom's Roman Catholic. And so I see this baby elephant, and its eyes are pitch black. But they're the most beautiful eyes I'd ever seen. And it telepathically is speaking to me. Its lips aren't moving. And it motions me down with its trunk, and I float down the stairs, and then I get absorbed into its eye. I flow into its eye, and I'm back in the same heaven space, this void, only now it's filled with wisdom. It's filled with, I can sense the depth of it. I can sense the wisdom. I can sense the intelligence. I can sense it's like an ocean of mercy, and I'm inside of it. And then I get pulled back out of it, and it says, go down the stairs and go outside. And I'm like, my parents, they don't want me leaving the house. I trust me. And so it motions with its trunk. I float down the stairs, and it stays there, but it also comes with me. So it's with me it's right next to me, but I can't see it. But I also know that it stayed where it was. And so I float through the two doors, the indoor and the storm door, and down the steps and out into this. We lived on a kind of a cul-de-sac in a city outside of Boston, and I was in front of a huge woodland. So where I lived, there were lots of stars, because there was the reservoir system for the city was basically in my backyard. And so I'm told to look up at the sky, and I'm in the middle of the street, and I look up at the sky, and as I look up, I see the beautiful starscape. And then suddenly the starscape sucks me into itself. I get sucked into it, and now I'm in the eternity that's underneath the starscape that scares the bejesus out of me. And I'm suddenly, as soon as I become aware of my own self, I'm back in my body again. So I told my mom about the first one, and it didn't go well. So I didn't tell anybody about the second one. And then when I was in high school, my sister comes into my NDE pretty heavily, but my sister had vanished when I was 14 and run away and kind of broke my family. And I was sort of suicidal in my senior year. I was working on the National Ski Patrol at a ski hill, and this day I had to work. It's like a Friday, and I was working that night. I took what I intended to only be. I went to a private Catholic high school, boys, where you could get drugs, and so I decided to take a hit of my first time ever doing this, San Pedro cactus, purple microdot mescaline, only I ended up taking 3 doses. So I took a triple dose of this, and long story short, I'm on the ski hill, tripping my brains out. And I'm a little nervous about it because I'd never tripped before, and I'm on duty, so there's like this is serious stuff, or could be. So I ski off to this back trail. And when I'm on this back trail, I stop. And when I stop, I hear erupt inside of everything, I am. And it's not only just in the trees and in the rocks. This is a snow-covered slope. It's in the trees and it's in the sky, and it's in me. Every cell inside my body is screaming this same voice, I am. And as I watch, it's also waving, all the trees, so everything's moving, and the hill is slopey. It's like water coming down, and it's all together. Even the motion was saying the same thing as the material. So the waveform and the particle form were all saying the same I am. So that was mind-blowing. And I had set aside, and my parents had told me that when I was a kid, I was more compassionate than most kids. I was a troublemaker. I definitely got in trouble. I could tell you stories about all sorts of things I did as an impish child with ADHD, and some of them were, the day that I ended up behind bars when I was in 7th grade, and my dad had to come collect me. So anyway, anyway, the result of this experience, this end of duality experience, resurrected inside of me this remembrance of these previous mystical experiences that I kept to myself. I even quieted them down inside myself. They were always present and living inside me. I couldn't get rid of them, but I didn't ever reflect on them. And so then I ended up going to this Catholic school. And this Catholic school was near this Trappist monastery that had a relationship with a Theravada Buddhist named Jack Cornfield, where they study Theravada Buddhism. And like back in the 50s in this monastery, they had a bunch of Hindus come into this monastery. I don't know this part of the story extraordinarily well. Was told to me the other day. I've got to look it up in the book. But apparently they had a before they got into the Theravada stuff, they had a bunch of Hindu monks living with them. And so they were revitalizing their own spirituality, and they developed centering prayer practice, but it was at the time called contemplative meditation. So this was 1977, and they had begun to teach this only a few years before. And my religion teacher at my Catholic school went on a retreat and learned this technique of centering into silence. And I took to it like a fish to water. Because of all this accumulation of mystical experience, in particular, the triple hit trip and the duality, I was seeking this, I was seeking it. And I found that in the silencing of my own mind, I perceived its presence. And so I began this practice in 77, all the way up through college. And I took acid a bunch of times and all, so I get out to Montana, where I was an exchange student. I was an undergraduate at UMass Amherst, where I work on my English degree. And I get out to Montana State because I wanted to get away from my family, because my family was broken because my sister had vanished, and all sorts of, there's adoptions, and it's a long, painful saga. But I was escaping. And so I go to Bozeman, National Ski Patrol at Bridger Bowl. I went there ostensibly to study the anthropology of Native American spirituality, because I was taking a lot of anthropology classes along with my English degree, because I really like anthropology. And so that's what I went out there for. Only it turns out that I couldn't, because it met at the same time as the one class I had to take that year, which was a Shakespeare class. So I ended up taking a class in American Sign Language, and I applied for their theater. They had this touring theater group. So I end up in this touring theater group. I've got some acting stuff going on. I'm getting some acting training, and they're doing a 24,000-mile, 64-show tour all over the Western United States. And they've been doing it for years. It's an established theater. And so I'm in this theater, but when March came around, I didn't want to go back to Boston because I'm escaping Boston, my family. And so I wanted to go on an adventure. My parents were not in favor of this. I'd already spent all this time in the Absarokies and in the Spanish Peaks and in Yellowstone and in Glacier. I've been backpacking all around the place and skiing. And so we go on this. I wanted to go on an adventure, and I went to the outdoor club, and I found this guy who had a trip planned, a 10-day trip. March break was 2 weeks. So we had a 10-day trip planned, and it was snow caving in British Columbia up to a place called Mount Assiniboine, and then ice climbing one day in Banff Provincial Park at a world famous climb called Lower Weeping Wall. And I've been a Boy Scout my whole life. I was a Boy Scout. I was a freaking Boy Scout until I was 18. Okay. So okay, the other part of the story is because I was a Boy Scout leader, it got me into the Coast Guard Academy. I had an appointment to Coast Guard Academy that I turned down to become an English major at UMass. And so all of this is all kind of cascading. So I have all this background in wilderness, and I was also in the ski patrol. So, and I was a first responder. So we go off and we do the snow caving trip, and it's difficult, but it's also spectacular. But we learn to trust each other. We're in the middle of this vast wilderness. My clock was going off. In this vast wilderness, and you have to trust each other because there's no one there going to save you. And the temperature. This is March. There's 10 feet of snow on the ground, and so we ski way out, and we learn a lot about each other and ourselves. And we come back in for this one-day ice climb. We get to this ice climb, and this is where I die. And so we get to this ice climb, and I'd been a backpacker and mountaineering, and I'd done a lot of UMass has an outdoor club too, and they did a lot of rock climbing. So I got to Montana, and I was already bouldering and scrambling and rock climbing, and so I did a lot of that when I was out there. But I'd never ice climbed. That's a very different thing, and similar. It's very different because it's really cold, and it's really cold. My mic's a little close. It's really cold, and you're using different tools. The axes and the crampons, and there's the danger of just the ice and the cold and the wet. So I didn't have all the gear. I borrowed or rented what I could, and I only could come up with a single ice axe and one ice hammer. And a hammer is a tool used primarily for chipping ice and installing and uninstalling ice screws. And it has a strap on the bottom so you don't drop it. But you can't set that in the ice and hang on it the way you can an axe, because an axe has a strap on it too, but you can set the axe in the ice, but the physics of it, the strap is attached further up the shaft, and you can let go of the axe, and you can just set that thing and hang on it and get a huge swing. So when I had this teeny tiny hammer, the head of the hammer was just like above my hand instead of being a foot and a half or whatever that was. So every stroke I took with the hammer was set me shorter on every aspect of my climb. And I could never relax. I could never rest my hand because I had to grip it all the time. Those two things, which we both knew about, well, in theory, knew about. We agreed that I could do this. I was a young bravado. I was a high speed super G. I was into super G. It's called super giant slalom, and super fast, right on the edge of control. That's my comfort zone. And so Tim, my climbing partner, was a certified lead climber on ice. He had just completed, he's my age, just completed a certification. I trusted him when we got to, and he deserved my trust, just to be clear about that. He totally deserved my trust. He earned it. And there were a bunch of other teams on the ice that day. We were the last team in, but this climb, I was slower than everybody else for those two reasons, the swing and the grip. And by the time 2 hours came before we reached the top of the climb, we already knew what kind of deep trouble we were in. There were teams, most of the teams were leaving in the last 2 hours. I was watching them get off the ice and leave. And so I was scared. One of the things you learn, a person learns while rock climbing, is that focused mental attention, kind of like silent meditation, the focused mental attention, which is similar to being in the flow state while skiing. You can't be thinking about your body when, like language, when you're skiing in the flow state. You've got to be in the flow state. The climbing is like a flow state, but it's singularly pointed, and it's pointed exactly where you are. And you can't be thinking about down below. You can be thinking about what the next move is up, but you can't be thinking about the height of it or the pressures that are on you, because if you are, then you're sure to fall. So it's got this self-reinforcing thing to it. So we talked about this difficult place we were in, but both of us kept our heads completely. I reached the top of the climb, and I'm going to make the story shorter so we can get to the death thing. We reached the top of the climb, and temperature drops 30 degrees. We're 500 or 600 feet up. It's dark. I see the last team leave, and we are in deep trouble. And it had been, there was a day on the mountain, I was working at Bridger Bowl as a volunteer. It was 50 below. And the morning that it was 50 below on the mountain was still open. They brought us into the patrol shack, or room it was a shack, and said, quick refresher course on hypothermia and frostbite. So this is like right in my face. And I know what situation we're in. We knew we were going to die. It was obvious. It was clearly stated. We're 600 feet, 500 feet up. We're on an ice face. There's nobody here. We're in British Columbia. We're in north of Banff in Alberta. And we are absolutely alone, and nobody's going to come and rescue us. And so we decided that if we were going to die, we were going to fight for our lives. And so that's what we did all night. And I went through this traumatic, harrowing, high altitude, desperate, level-headed, mental focused self-rescue. And I'm going to skip all that stuff. It makes for quite an exciting adventure story. But I'm going to go to the last rappel. So we fight our way across the mountain all night. And as we fight our way across the mountain, the hypothermia keeps increasing. So we get colder and colder. The symptoms get worse and worse, and they include loss of cognitive function. You can't make you begin to lose your ability to make rational decisions, and everything was frozen. So here I am. Someone asked me yesterday, what's with the half gloves, man? And the half gloves are because I had frostbite. I had frostbite really bad, and my hands get really cold all the time, and they hurt. Knuckles hurt, the fingers hurt, all my nails split all the time. It's never a day in my life that I go, unless it's like 80 outside in the summertime, that I don't know that this thing happened. It's always a reminder. I can't feel my big toe. Every time I take a step, I know that I can't feel it. So it had, anyway, so we're at this third rappel. And we'd driven ourselves all through the night. And I found inside myself that I wasn't just singularly driving myself with my willpower, but there was this part of me that was mammalian, or maybe reptilian, this deep, deep part of my brain that wanted only its own survival. And it stopped being about my willpower, and it started being about this deeper drive. And that space opened up inside of me. That space has stayed with me my whole life. So I have this drive, that capacity that is beyond my own. Like I have very strong mind, I guess is the way to put it. And so we're clipped in. This is the first place on the mountain where there's, that's not quite true. It's the first place on the mountain where there are carabiners and harnesses and carabiners epoxied into the mountain for climbers to strap into. Just above us, the rappel we had just come down had an iron pin epoxied for a rope to go through. So we rappelled down this dark crag. We were standing on this landing the size of a dining room table. And Tim is to my left, I'm to the right, and we're clipped in, and hypothermia is advanced. My feet are like ice blocks. I'm wearing a mesh t-shirt, which was all the rage from Norway for the last 100 years for thermal insulation, because this is like wool and mesh. So that's how I'm dressed. I got a polypropylene top because it was brand new material, and it snapped up the front, red. and a 60/40 jacket from LL Bean and a rag wheel sweater and a rag hat and rag wheel mittens with leather chaps, leather ski boots and rag wool socks with wool pants. And that's what I'm dressed in long underwear. And climbing's a wet sport because you sweat. And so wool retains something like 70% of its heat, but not 100%. And I wasn't able to generate any more heat because I consumed all my food. And so all these pressures are against us. And every step we took, we felt our energy meter lower, and yet we knew that we had to keep going to survive. And so we're all not just up against the hypothermia, we're up against our own energy level in the mix of the hypothermia. When do we run out of energy power before we die? And so now we're standing on this cliff, and I have the rope, and Tim's to the left, and the moon had come up a little bit, and so we could see better. And I tied very slowly and very carefully tied the rope, taking off my gloves and not really able to move my hands, tied the rope to my harness, tossed off the rope to the side, and pulled on it. And as soon as I yanked on it, it was jammed, like like this rope is just like that. And so now it's stuck, and I got maybe 3 inches, if that, on the first pull, and the rope is laying across the edge of the cliff. So I couldn't, flip the rope in a waveform to loosen it up from whatever was holding it, because the waveform ended at the edge of the cliff. And I couldn't climb back up again because I only had one end of the rope. And I'm in carabiners. I mean, I'm in carabiners. I'm in crampons on my feet, and it's dark around the corner too. And so now we're in the situation where death is imminent. We both know it, and we can't get out of this. There's no way, and we're 150 feet up. You can't drop down. You drop down. There's a huge, what's called a talus cone at the bottom of these mountains, which is basically huge boulders that have fallen off the cliffs for thousands of years. And so if you jump, even if there's snow on it and it's wind blowing, there's still this huge rock pile at the bottom. So that was not even possible. We're clipped into the mountain, and I began to die. Am I dying? I know what's going on. And so suddenly my body gets completely hot. My core gets very, very hot, and I feel all the blood rush from my extremities up to my chest. And I think to myself, I don't need my hands. I don't need my feet to survive. I only need these. These are the essential parts. I understand this. But because all the heat rushed to my core, I got hot. And so I knowingly irrationally opened my coat. Not that it was just a nylon coat, but it was still thermal insulation, and it would let a whole lot of heat out, but I didn't care because I was hot. And so Tim yelled at me, zip up your coat. I'm like, no freaking way, I'm hot. And then I realized it was over, and my drive went away, and I settled into this peaceful place where I transitioned into this acceptance of my death. And then I thought about my parents, and then I fell asleep. I would wake up and pull myself back up. And the last time I stood up, I had this tunnel vision that shrunk down, and it became black. And instead of losing consciousness, I did each time I fell asleep, I retained consciousness, and the darkness opened up in front of me. And we're half hour in. Do you want me to keep telling? Okay, so the darkness opened up in front of me, and even though I was confused, I didn't understand what was going on. The darkness was not unfamiliar to me. I didn't understand why I was outside of it and why I could see it. I didn't know what it meant. I just knew that I couldn't feel my body anymore, and I didn't understand why. And then a pinprick of light appeared in this darkness of a million zillion miles away. And this pinprick of light illuminated the whole space. And so now I can see the darkness more clearly, and it rushed across this distance toward me at faster than the speed of light. And as it came to me, it filled my vision the closer it got, and it communicated to me telepathically, no language, download, I'm taking you. And I said, no, you're not. And I reached back inside my body, sort of, or inside my mind, And I grabbed all of the willpower that I had used all night, and I kind of put it up like a shield. No, you're not. And it just kept coming at me, and it reached, it itself reached through the field, which as if it was, you know, candy glass, and entered into me and took me. And at the moment that it took me, I lost all of my agency. I had no capacity for any decision making. I could only experience. And so I'm inside of this entity, which I know, but and it speaks to me comfort and intelligence. And so this, when I was 5 years old, when this entity came to collect me, it showed itself in this superpositioning. It was both a reduced entity, limited for me, but also it was the fullness of the divine. And it felt like the divine was speaking through it, but also it had its own, I don't want to say identity, but thingness to itself, even though it's not a thing at all. So this same entity comes to collect me, this angel, this field of consciousness, and I'm inside of it. And it's speaking to me in this superpositioned way. It's showing me its intelligence. That's the first thing it showed me. It's vast intelligence. It's far vaster than I can't comprehend here. I couldn't comprehend it there. I could see it there, but now it's like, oh, and mercy and comfort and well-being, and I am suffused with this, and I'm inside of it, and I'm in like a cloud form, like the, you know, with the harp, playing the harp on the cloud. I'm inside of this cloud of this being, but I can't move, and I can see through it, and I can see all of the darkness into the void, and I'm also outside of myself. I'm simultaneously outside of this entity. I have a second point of view. And this I that has no form is traveling simultaneously, paralleling my light body, because I still had a shape. But I wasn't physical. I had described everything I'm saying is metaphor. It's all metaphor. So I have an energetic body made of photons, but they're not photons. But it's uniform in its appearance, and yet it has shape. And I can see this from the outside. And as I look at where I can see simultaneously the other perspective looking at me, I can't see from this side that I only see darkness, but I can see that I'm seeing this. So I'm seeing two things at once, and it's speaking inside of me and giving me comfort. And I have no power to, like a Raggedy Ann doll, and so it takes me up and as it gets back to the place where it had come from, it unfolded itself, or I popped out of it. I'm still here. It is 40 years later. There are parts of it I can't quite see, and so somehow it has become this void plus. It's not the smaller void that I was in when I was contained inside the unit of the angel. I am that now. I am this ball of consciousness that no longer has a light body. I am a sphere, an orb of being, and I am self-reflective. I know that this is who I am. I understand that this has always been who I was, will be, and am, and I am content with where I am alone inside. If this was the biblical, I would say, the belly of the whale, Jonah in the belly of the whale. I'm inside the universe by myself, and Jonah was not content, but I was totally content. I'm inside, and I can see in every direction at once. And I can see in every direction at once, like I had 10,000 eyes, or I was a single eye with the capacity with one big pupil. I'm like one big pupil, and I can see everywhere at once, and I can see far into the distance. And what I see in the furthest distance is darkness that I can't see into. And there's an eternity and infinity beyond my sight, but I am also inside of it. And as I'm inside of it with this contentment, it opens itself, it unfolds itself, and it's like this huge waterfall of light comes down or out, and it's all of the colors of all of the stars. I could see that night, billions of stars, all these different colors, and all these other colors that I can't see with the human eye. And it's also simultaneously white. So it is both of these things at the same time, not like when you're doing multitasking and I'm flipping from one thing to another thing. There was no flipping. They were both there at the same time. And it was solid. I could see the surface. It was translucent. I could see into it, and I could see the depth of it. And it was transparent because I could see the darkness beyond it. And it was the most seductive thing that I had ever witnessed, and all I wanted was it. And it came toward me, and I went toward it, and I touched it with my being, and it flowed inside of me. And as it flowed inside of me, all these things happened at once. So I'm already in timelessness. So there's no past and future. Past and future are one thing. And it's not just our past and our future in this universe, it's all time everywhere, and all of the multiverses, which are smaller than the divine itself. And so I'm inside of this, and it flows into me. And here I realize I ended up saying way more than I intended to. Do you want me to stop here? I could stop here, and people can go find out what happened next somewhere else. I can say I leave you on the cliff. And I will say that a lot more happened, and I had a unitive state of being where I was utterly and completely transformed by love beyond measure for them, and I chose to come back, which I regretted the moment that I came back. So I could leave it all there and stop for a minute, because I realized I've been rattling on here.
No, it's beautiful, and thank you. Yes, I'm familiar with some of those states of being, and it really resonated with me. So I was just invested in the story. So
okay, all right. I can keep going, or we can talk about other stuff. Either way is cool with me.
Oh, I'm happy either way. I mean, I know you've had a very extensive experience. So, those details are very important, because not many people have been there, so I'm happy to hear them. So,
Okay, I'll try to summarize.
okay.
So let me say that after this first near-death experience, the mystical experiences continued. This is not the end of them. And so I'm in this state, and I give it a structure, because, and this is the reason why I went to divinity school and studied mysticism, because I had to figure out what happened to me. I needed a language to think about it, and because it was so utterly person changing. So I went through, I could hear my name being called, but wasn't my name Peter. It was the actual essence of my being called into being continually since my origination. And that it was, I still hear this came back with me, and it's been a curse and a blessing. And so I hear this, and I see that I am utterly known. I see that as this human being, Peter, that there were no parts of me that were unknown, that my entire life, it wasn't like a movie. It was like all of the data all at once, right? I could see that there were no parts of the data that were unseen by the eye of fire. I was in an eye of fire that could see every part of me, and I was illuminated, but this illumination hurt me. And what hurt me was that I could then see all of my own dark places. I could see all of the pain that I caused in my entire life in a sequence from my childhood on, of all of the times I had hurt people with intention, but not always with intention. But with intention was much more powerful, because with the intention, I was inside of all of these other people who I hurt, experiencing their emotions and their psychology and their response as if I was them, but I was inside of them as a witness. And I was inside of my own life witnessing my own reasoning and my own emotions for causing them that pain, seeing the size of the pain that I caused them from my point of view, and seeing the actual experiencing the wound that I did give them from their point of view. And the wounds that I gave away were at a maximum compared to the minimum of what I thought they were. And they all belonged to me. They were my karma, was all the pain I gave away. I created this pain and I suffered the darkness of it. And I was also shown simultaneously all of humanity and all of the darkness of all of humanity and my radical equality with all of it. No one above the other. And it wasn't, and the voice, I can hear the voice speaking to me, and the voice is saying to me, it's not just you, it's the matrix of the design of the universe. The whole place is built this way. Everything consumes something else. Everyone has limitation. Everyone has, because without this limitation, without the presence of the false self, there's no survival here. And the false self presents itself because of the limitation. And so I could see the impurity of the structure of the whole universe and the purity with the capital P of the ultimate divine, and compare between the two. And it was obvious that I was not to be blamed for the structure of the design of the place where I was, but I did carry the karma of the negative pain that I created. And as I experienced all of this simultaneously, there was this other thing that came with me from when I was dead. And that was, when I was dying, was all of the love that I had given away in my life was mine. And all of the love that people had given to me in my life was mine. And it became like an ear in my heart. If I had a heart, but I didn't, because I wasn't human anymore. But as I listened to it, I could hear the voice of the divine more clearly. As I listened to the ear of the love that had been given to me, I turned, this is all metaphor, I turned toward the face of the divine that has no face, because it is no thing. And its flood inside me expanded me. It expanded me to in this unitive state where bliss, paradise, beauty, love, truth, knowledge, everything I wanted to know in an instant, everything I wanted to know about love, everything I wanted to know about the structure of the universe, beauty, paradise, awe, adoration, joy, truth, all of these were one thing, light, love. And I reached this expansive state where then I saw myself and my origin. And I could see myself in this original state, like a single photon. And I was a single photon separated from the field of photons. Like there's this thing called the Higgs boson field where energy becomes matter. And so I am one of those particles in a limited, not in the core of my being, because I am still the same, but I am not inside the field. I am outside the field, yet super connected to it. And so I have this vision of the totality of myself and the relationship of my oneness. And then I see all of my past lives inside a sort of a lesser soul than my truer self. But none of these past lives are me. Not even in the lesser soul. They're like sewing needles or knitting needles stabbed into a loaf of a baguette, and there are lots of them, but the baguette is bigger than any of the knitting needles. And I was shown inside two of these lives, and in one of these lives I asked, and in one of these lives I was a human being. And I was a man, and I was walking on a road barefoot, and there were palm trees and there was dirt, and I don't know where I was or who I was, but I was living inside this guy. I mean, we walked this distance. I saw these people. I could see the clothes, and then I was out, and then I was in this other form. And in this other form, I don't know what I was. I was a lizard. I was a butterfly. I was on another planet. The eye I was seeing through presented an entirely different world. That it wasn't like like you see a dog cam and the dog has the camera and it looks like it's the dog cam. Well, not really, because the dog's eye has different physical structures and sees a different thing than you do. And so I was seeing this entirely different world. I don't know what I was or where I was, but I knew that it wasn't me. And so then I get retracted back in, and I am in this expansive state. And in this expansive state of union, I am one molecule away from obliteration. I am, and this the sweetness of the bliss is like that point at which when is this a PG show? Before before orgasm, where sometimes it is so it's almost painful.
I know.
And so there's this place at which I reach this ultimate expansion that I was capable of handling before I would be annihilated back into non-being again. And the divine had no gender, it had no form, it was no thing, there was no religion, there was no concepts, there was no language, there was no thinking, there was none of these things even existed. No pain, no suffering. And then I got contracted back down. So I get contracted back down, and now I can kind of see my life. And I say, my recent life, and I say, am I dead? And the voice says, you're dead. And I say, but I can't go yet. And the voice says, why not? It's your time, come home. And I say, because my parents, they lost their daughter, my sister. She didn't die. She ran away. She vanished. And the wound that never heals. And so no funeral. They're going to really lose their son. And it was going to be international news. It was going to be, two dopes from Montana, exchange student, and I said, but they're going to suffer without me. They're going to lose two kids. And the voice, as soon as I said that, it swept me across heaven, across paradise, to this edge where physical, like this Higgs boson field, where the energy of the divine becomes the material world. And I part of me was like my head, but it wasn't my head because I didn't have a head. But it was like part of me was stuffed outside of paradise into the physical world, and I could see the entire universe. I could see all of our star systems. I could see all of our galaxies. I could see back to the origin of the universe. I could see to the very pinpoint beginning, beyond which there was only darkness. But there's this darkness, and from this darkness, universe upon universe upon universe is emitting, just one after the other. And I'm inside of one. I'm inside of one of these universes, but more and more and more of them are just constantly unflowing from it, are flowing from it, petal after petal after petal. And meanwhile, my whole being is infused with love. All of this, it was showing me that all of itself, all of these universes, our universe, were being birthed out of its own self-love. And that I am made out of the same substance. And I can see this love pervading not just all of the galaxies in our universe and all of the everything that's on all of those galaxies or inside of them, but in all of these universes. And I can see that it's coming out of the darkness, and the darkness itself, I know that the darkness itself is the beloved. And it aims all of this at me. It aims all of it at me in particular, and it says to me, in the way I love you now, I have always loved you for all eternity. There has never been me not loving you. Me not loving you is you having being me, in which case you're still being loved by me, because I am all there is. And it's all focused at me, was, is, and shall be love beyond my capacity to express to anyone, even in the filter of my body. I know there's so much more that I can't feel, even though I brought so much of it back with me. And meanwhile, as this is happening to me, my vision is swept across all these galaxies to our galaxy, to our star system, and down to Earth. And I see Earth as this hologram. And on this hologram, there's 7 billion living people. So this is live time. I'm seeing this, and I could zoom in. I remember zooming in on this one. This is like a ship at sea in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and I kind of zoom in, and I see everybody aboard, and I see this one guy, and I zoom back out again, and I see every single person. I see them all at once, and I can zoom in and zoom out. But everybody, I have a clear vision of everyone, and I see what everybody's doing, being human in all the ways that you can imagine. Half the planet's asleep, half the planet's awake, but being as violent and beautiful as humans are in every single person. And inside every single person is this same love that's inside of me. There's this golden light speck, like a speck of gold dust that's buried inside these people. And the whole planet is covered with a foam. And nobody can see this light as I can see it from my vantage point, but everything is absolutely beloved. And the voice says, nothing is lost. No one can be lost. I am all there is. I cannot lose myself. I can only love myself. And because of my love, you now know the eternal nature of yourself and of all these people. You are my prodigal child, but so is everybody else. Every single one of us in exile. And then I see my parents' faces, and I see my mom and my dad, and I see the accumulation of all of their suffering of all of these years. And I see two lives for them. I see they're living with me alive, and I see them living without me dead. And I see their end, and I see their end of life. And in their end of life, they're just like me, where I am, in this beauty. And the voice shows me the experience of my life with them and their life with me and without. And I see their suffering compounded. Both are filled with suffering. One has a container ship full of it, and the other one has a lobster boat. And I choose I say, because of timelessness, the length of my human life was the wink of my eye. And so if I go back and I come back here, and the voice says, it's your time to stay, but yes, if you go back, you can come back here. And I say, I choose to live my life. And it says, you won't live your life, and shot me out. And as I was shot out, I got compressed, and it's with me, and it's also still there. So it's traveling with me, and it's communicating to me, and I'm getting denser and denser. As I get denser and denser, I'm presented with a million options, a million doorways, and all of them are closed. And in the middle of the doorways of all of them, there's this huge beam of white light, like the most spectacular laser beam of the size of the width of the sun, beaming from behind me, from the presence of the paradise. And it suffuses all of these doors in a lessening degree as it runs out to the edges of these doors. And all of them are options. They're all lives for me. And they're all aimed back at this body. And it says, choose light. And I see the beam of light, and I'm like, no, I want some humanity. But the light is so attractive, I choose close to the light. I don't go into self-annihilation inside of it. A laser beam, fire, total consumption. I choose creativity, I choose writing, I choose a little bohemian, I choose, but I choose light, and the door opens, and I'm in this tunnel leading back to my body. And then there's all these other doors inside this tunnel, and all these other doors are probabilities. They're all choices, and they all lead to all of these other tunnels. And I pop out, and as I get to the end, and this angelic form is still with me, and I'm getting denser and denser and denser. And when I get to the edge of my body, I see my body on the cliff, dangling, and it rips open my chest. It sticks in like it rips open my chest, and it grabs me, and it screws me, and I feel like an ice screw, and I feel like I'm being an ice screw, and it's painful, and I'm being ground back into this body, and I'm like, what is going on? What is going on? And now I used to be this big, and now I'm this big. And I'm under pressure. I'm pressurized in this space. And so I'm inside of this body, and the body is the pressurization suit. And the opening is still in my heart, and I can see heaven. I can see this, and I can see this being, and I can see it, and I watch it, and it closes, and now I'm imprisoned. and I'm imprisoned inside of this thing, and I feel my brain whir up like a computer coming on. You boot it up, like we used to say back in the 80s, you boot up the computer, whoa, like that. Televisions with the tubes
Yeah.
that get light, and this kind of winds its way up. And as it winds its way back online, all I feel is pain. Everything is pain. I'm compressed, and my hands, I don't even know what hands are. All I know is pain. And my hearing comes back, and I begin to hear voice shouting at me, and I open my eyes, and there's this thing screaming at me, and I begin to understand language. You were dead. You were dead. Don't die. Don't die. Don't die. Don't die. And he pulls me up. It's Tim, of course, and I don't know who I am or where I'm going or what I am. And my life unfolded from there. And I'll end this portion before we talk about the rest of is that the meditation I learned was my salvation. Without the possibility of having this one tool, when I came back, I don't know what I would have done. I was lost and alone. I was in exile. I became angry at my own choice. I became a different entity. It's like the movie Avatar. It's like, I don't know how to, you know what I'm talking about. You come back a
Yes.
different person.
Yes, exactly. And you're like, and you know, the hardest part I think with that, and I wonder if you felt this as well, is, you know, people are still going by the same storyline of who you used to be. And you don't fit. And you don't see things the same. And most of my memories weren't even the same. Like they didn't even match up with other people, what they had of me. So I was curious, how did that play out for you after this big event?
Oh, majorly masking. I learned to mask. I was pretty good at masking by that point anyway, for other reasons, family
Mm.
stuff and ADHD. But I had the advantage of not being in my hometown. So the people that knew me were all these theater people. So all these students, they're all students, and they all knew me pretty well. And we went on this tour together. And because I was such a radically different person, I separated myself from them. And we had two vehicles, a 15-passenger van and a pickup truck carrying a trailer. And we, on the way home from ice climbing, I totaled the car against a semi, and we ended up in jail. So I have a jail theme in my life. And we weren't in jail long, but I was definitely locked behind bars both of those times. Not very long in either case, but and for neither case was anything, you know. When I was a kid, I shoplifted tennis balls on a dare from my Boy Scout troop. Go figure.
Oh, no Eagle Scout for you.
Anyway, this other time in Canada, we refused to pay a speeding fine, and they arrested us and locked us up till we paid the fine. So, and then I totaled the car, and I wasn't even driving. So there you go.
3 times the charm.
So anyway, I've traveled in this theater company, and I separated myself from them. I was supposed to drive the van. I was supposed to drive the pickup truck. Because of this car wreck, I was a wreck. On top of dying and not knowing who I was anymore, I had a stutter. The car wreck gave me a stutter, and they changed my name in sign language. You have names, and so this is Rock, and Peter means rock. So the letter P, that was my name in sign language. This is Peter. But instead, they named me Stuttering Peter. And unfortunately, in sign language, I didn't stutter, but I did stutter when I spoke. And so I stopped talking in language, very minimal talking, signing because I could, because everybody there signed. So it wasn't a big deal. I separated myself and I dove inside my meditation. I had brought my sleeping bag and my sleeping pad on this trip, and I sat in the back of the pickup truck by myself for 24,000 miles. I rode in the van one day. And in the front of the cab a few times when it rained in the truck, but only with 1 or 2 other people, not with the whole crowd. I couldn't deal. And when I came home again that summer, I hitchhiked back. Long story how we ended up hitching back to Boston, but we shipped our stuff and hitchhiked back home. And that summer, I was an entirely different person. And about 5 years ago, I asked my parents, because when I came out to my parents many years later, they didn't believe me. Nobody did. And so I said to them years later, after I came out to them, I said, so remember that summer? Did you notice anything different about me? And my dad's like, yeah, we talked about it. Your mom and I both noticed that you were kinder and more compassionate and more empathetic. And you just were a different person. We didn't understand why. And I said, well, this is the reason why, Dad. This is why. And so my whole life, I came back a different person. And when I was back in Boston, I went back to UMass Amherst that next year, where nobody really knew me. I worked that summer in construction, as I worked in construction most of my way through college, and I worked for the same company. But when you're working, you're not talking. So I didn't say anything to these guys. But my behavior around them was different. Now, this is part of the story I haven't really told. One of the managers, one of the on-site foremen, was pretty violently, verbally anti-feminist, white male, toxic, like, and he one day was talking about this dear friend of mine tying her up and raping her, and I freaked. I freaked. And it was, I might have, when I was a kid, might have been like, yeah, let's have sex with her. And but I was a very different person. I couldn't deal with that kind of and he's my boss. And I didn't go after him physically, but I went after him verbally, and I paid a price for that. But it was totally worth paying. And so my behavior, my generalized behavior, became not only more compassionate, but more stand up on my 2 feet for those who can't stand on their own. And that was a radical change.
Now, I'm curious, because I know with mine, like how you were talking about being able to see through everybody in like your life review and literally plug your consciousness in, which I experienced. Now, did you bring that with you? Like when I see people, I can see that whole 360 view now. And so that's where the compassion comes from. I mean, how did that play out for you? Is that how you sense people?
I do. I came back seeing light in everything there is. There's nothing here that does not contain light. But around people, it's also black and white here too, and flickery and very two-dimensional to me. But people, dogs, cats, birds, trees, flowers, they all have an aura to them. I see the radiance around every single person I look at. If I look for it, there it is. If I'm not looking for it, I can ignore it. But if as soon as I look for it, there it is, and it's around all. See it in the human eyes, and I see the light. The light sees itself, and as a result of the light seeing itself, I've got this extrasensory power where I see people. I sense who they are. It was overlaid with, when I came back, this wide. You ever watch Star Trek where they have the phasers and you get hit with a phaser and they vaporize you? And then there is different settings, and the lowest setting is they make this wide field of the phaser, and it just knocks everybody down. So, and everybody's knocked out. So I felt like I had a phaser, and it was in this wide field where I was in love with everybody. I was in love with everybody I met. Even though I could see who they were, I still was in love with them. And that, I've gotten wiser on how to manage that after effect. But the capacity for the seeing of the light in the soul remains the same. And I feel people. I feel who they are. It's not like I see, oh, when Susie was 3 years old, she sucked on her thumb and got scolded, kind of thing. And it left this wound in her. I can see wound. I see pain. I see suffering. I see the radical equality of our humanity. I see the radical equality of my own brokenness. I see my own brokenness as I see your brokenness. And this creates this equality between us. But I also see your light as my own light, which creates this greater unity among us all. And I've learned to cultivate that. I've spent my life The reason I went to divinity school, I didn't go in the family plan. I was going to go into architecture, the family business, is working in construction, because I needed to find myself and understand who I had become. And I told nobody about it because no one was going to understand. And I found tools. I found tools that ancient mystics had been using for centuries, and I employed those tools secretly in my own life in order to discover whether what they said was true, because I was desperate and lost enough and in suffering pain enough that the only thing that could ever satisfy me was the oneness of being itself. And so it became the singular pursuit of my entire life, my beloved, more so than anything else in my life. And that includes the people I love, my wife and my kids and my pets and my mom and my dad and my siblings and my friends and everybody who I love in a real human way. This one love includes them all and supersedes them all. And it became the point of my pursuit. So I early on, the year that I came back, I found the Yoga Sutras, and by Patanjali, the second section. I began to employ those in I had already been a meditator, so I employed those in my meditation. I read Yogananda, the autobiography of Yogananda, and the 25th chapter about Kriya. And then I was in this mime class. So I'm back and I'm taking this mime class at UMass. And my teacher is a student of Marcel Marceau. And Marcel Marceau's school of practice includes Hatha Yoga. And so every time we begin mime class, we practice Hatha. And then one day he shows us chakra. He shows us chi. And I find it like that. And it's hot in my hands, and I get to move it and stretch it. And when he asks and we're doing this in yoga posture, and he's instructing us, I'm like, oh my God, there's like this silly putty in my hands. It's like taffy. I can feel this energetic thing, and anybody else in the class can feel it. And anybody in the class feel it. I say me, nobody else. I had like 20 people. He says, come up, kneel in front of me. I kneel in front of him, close your eyes, put your palms up. And he says, now, what do you feel? I say, I feel pinwheels going like this. And I feel them stop. I feel them going like this. I feel them stop. I feel them going like this. I feel them going like this. And I open, he says, open your eyes. And his hands are an inch from mine. And he's doing this. He said, now do you feel this? Do you feel it over there? And so I feel this energy. He said, where did you learn that? I said, I don't know. I don't know. But what I learned was that I had a subtle body. I knew I had a subtle body, but what I didn't know was that my subtle body was me. My subtle body is me. And by aiming at this oneness of being for the pursuit of my life and practicing the Kriya privately inside my own world for 40 years and doing this in secret, even from my family. Everybody knew I did yoga. Everybody knew I meditated. Nobody knew what my journey was on the inside, because I didn't know whether it was going to work. These guys said it was going to work. I was desperate. I was alone in exile. So I pursued this thing, and it's manifested. So the manifestation of the singular intention is the presence of paradise within. The paradise leaks into my life. It doesn't make me, if I were a rich man, I'm Tevye, because I ain't no rich man. But I am rich beyond compare.
You live in abundance.
I live in abundance, but it's not an abundance of, there are some things. I have lots of glass. I have a friend who's a glass blower. I have lots of glass where she sends me glass all the time. So there's an abundance of glass in my house. But the abundance is the presence itself. And the grounding I find in the world is by aiming at this one singular intention. Not my intention for today, my intention for anybody else. It's my intention for no self. My intention to become no one. And in doing this, which it turned out to have been the biggest challenge of my life, because when I chose my life path, I chose to cling to humanness. And I remember what I was thinking. I was thinking to myself, if I'm going back as a messenger, how are they going to understand me unless I'm human? If I'm not like them, it's like, you got to be one of them. You got to join the tribe in order for it to work. And so it turns out that single choice that I made had been the struggle of my life. I clung to a portion of myself, and I continued to have mystical experiences, but I was angry that I had been allowed to come back and lost the fullness of the paradise. And so I pined for the fullness of the paradise. It was the push at my back. It's the spear point at my back, shoving me on toward this single place inside myself. And if there's an after effect, I have radioactive, not radioactive, electromagnetic things. And I live kind of shifting in time. I see my life before it happens and all these kinds of things that people are really interested in because it's psychic. But really, for me, speaking for myself, the most powerful after effect for me is the unitive state of being that I can cultivate inside myself. And then I live in a bubble of heaven here, which means I live connected there, which means I have my footing now. I came back in this world and I had no footing here. And I tried to find footing here and I couldn't find it here. I could only find it there. And the more I developed my footing over there, it turns out the more footing I had over here. And so all the things I've done, I went to divinity school, a scholarship student at Yale, and in fact, and I got into Princeton too. And I say that because I'm dyslexic and ADHD. I shouldn't have got into either of those two schools, not by a long shot, but that's what happened. And then I got talked into being a minister, and I became, instead of going on for my doctorate in mysticism, which I had planned, I got talked into being a minister, and we got pregnant, my wife and we were going to have this baby, and I had to keep the job. And so I continued in church ministry, hiding as a mystic, living my interior prayer life, which I put in my contract. Peter has to be able to do yoga and meditation and no back talk for it, basically. And then I was in this kind of church healing ministry, but I'm not a believer. I'm not a believer. I know the divine is one, and I understand what mythology is because of my anthropology background and my literature background. I understand metaphor and symbol and sign and Joseph Campbell and all this stuff. And so I was a secret agent inside the church working on behalf of the divine. And then there was this huge embezzlement. And I got blamed, and it was terrible, and all the suffering drove me deeper into my yoga life and all these mystical experiences. And then I got recruited into TV, and I spent 15 years. I had 30 million views a year. I had a 2-minute spot on a TV show, 90-year-old organization. When it ended, 91, I was the 5th minister on a broadcast on 2 NBC stations in Maine. I had 2 minutes every morning to be an inspirational storyteller for the state. Meanwhile, I'm cultivating the light inside of me. And I've come to understand, this is the other thing that I really want to get across, is that it's not knowledge. You can have all the knowledge and all the ability to articulate. You can have all the understanding, all the head stuff. That's not that thing. Those are the ways we are limited in our forms to speak about it. It's the divine energy itself. That you sit inside this energy, inside yourself, then it speaks. I'm speaking to you. I know that I'm speaking to you. I'm feeling this with my heart as I'm talking to you, because it also has this Shakti pot, this connection between spaces, this radiance, this magnification. And so that's what I was doing in television. I came, and this microphone comes from the radio station because I had a radio show too. And it projects through the microphone because it comes into the throat chakra, because it comes up from the heart, because you practice the enlivenment of the prana inside of you. And it becomes a flow. It becomes instead of expending it like at the end of the day, the SpongeBob is squeezed to dryness. There's a place at which, through practice, in my case, accompanied by a grace that I did not deserve, opened the other channel, another channel, so that the flow comes of its own. And when the flow comes of its own, the self is removed. So I obviously have an egoic self. All right. Okay. I totally do. I'm a scary guy on skis because I go so fast sometimes I slow down. Okay. I slow down when I'm going through the slow areas, but I'm going probably twice as fast as anybody wants me to be going, but I'm probably going half the speed that I want to be going. And so I know that I still got these things about myself that are part of my personality and character. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about attachment. I'm talking about non-attachment to self. And the healing thing that happens in the non-attachment to self is that the witnessing perspective of emotions, psychology, relationships, become a witness to your own life because you are your original self. And then you get to live inside your body in the filter that you are, living as you do, whoever you are, wherever you are, doing whatever you do, among the people that you're with. And for the history of the world, there have been mystics like us. And some of them had NDEs and many of them did not. And some of them were educated, they wrote books. And then there was all these people who had the transformative experience of a visitation from the dead, where they now know their dead one isn't dead. They know that they're alive, or they've loved enough in their life to their puppy dogs and their children, or their friends, or their place, that they understand the power of love. And all of us, this is a natural state of being for us. We all live below the veil. We all have this inside us in the nature of our being. We are made image of image, light from light, true God from true God, to rip off the creed. That is who we are. And I'm gonna give Jesus a little plug here, because he's most maligned, but because he's most misunderstood. He wasn't. If you read the Gospel of Thomas, you'll get a better understanding of the Gospel of Mary. You'll catch a drift that he's saying the same thing everybody else is, that the singleness and the oneness of being is the avenue inward. And what am I doing now? My book got sold, optioned for a film. I've been working on this for 2 years with them. And I met with them in Malibu and Pacific Palisades in October, and they want to option my next book. I'm writing a next book for them as Act 1 and Act 2 for the book that they optioned, so that we can have a movie but it's all in my life. It's all autobiographical. And so over the next 3 months, I'm finally taking 3 weeks, a week a month, to finish these 3 chapters that I owe them. I owe them 2.5 chapters. I'll finish those. The movie will get underway. And then I'm going to take those to my new literary agent and propose a new book, and maybe hopefully have them both come out simultaneously. Because what I want to talk about is not so much my NDEs. I want to talk about everybody. I want to expose what has been repressed by religion and society. I want to expose the natural state of mysticism in human beings. Part of the purpose I wrote the first book was to be a first person out of the gate to stand up and say, near-death experience is real. But I hid the larger picture because I didn't think people were ready to hear about mystical experience. But I think they are now.
Very much.
Right. So that's what I'm trying to do, is I'm trying to get out the door and say, risk my credibility, risk my finances, risk my social relationships, because this is the one thing that's real. Capital R, nothing else is. And I've never been trying to convince anybody. I'm not here as an evangelist. Like, if you read this when I was in college, they'd hand you a book. They'd be like, if you read this book, by the end, you can get Jesus Christ as your personal Lord and Savior. And then you're in the door. And that's not that. I am not that. It's like, you have it inside yourself. You need to find it for yourself. But the thing is, it's super easy and really simple. So it's kind of like no fail.
Yeah, I always call it I always say the divine portal is within you. You know, people are always like, how do I find that? How do I get there? And I'm like, it's within you. You have to sit in your own, I say, frequency long enough to learn yourself.
And how do you do that? That's what I'm trying to, that you 100% of what you're saying. And frequency portal, it's like the same door that I came in through is the door that I'm leaving through.
Yes. I have a question for you, because you understand this, and I don't get many that understand that on that level. Like when I do my healing and I walk through and I see like the divine spark that comes into them, and I can go back to that level. I find that the initial wound, I call it the original PTSD, is what you were talking about, from being all that is and how you got crammed back into this itty bitty thing, and then thinking you are separate from everything. To me, I call that the initial wound. How do you see that? Like, you know what I mean, for like how people are.
I have not articulated it to myself the way you just did, but I 100% agree with you. It was the original wound for me in life 2.0, but now I'm in life 3.5 because I died again in 2015, heart attack. But the transition was much easier. the original wound for me is this, when the angelic being ripped me open and stuffed me inside and I'm stuck. The original wound for me is the imprisonment itself. It's suffering itself. It's not like I've had trauma, of course, lots of trauma, and the night I died took me years. It took me going back to the place I died so that I could finally tell the story without crying all the way through it, instead of living through my trauma. And so that was a big trauma for me. But the real trauma for me is the suffering itself. It's the separation. It's the loss of the divine being. It's what you said a minute ago. It's the very thing, or something like this. You said something like, that's the very thing I lost is the thing that propels me forward. My loss of it is my motivation.
It's to find that path to return to what feels like home.
Yes, and you do get to return. You said it. Me too. I get to go back, and I get to go, and the more I go inside the singular point, this inflection point between my spiritual being and my physical being, which are not really separate, because this one actually folds around this one. This one has its being because of this one, but that's not the way my ego experiences it. And my ego experiences it in its primary place of silence. And in this primarily balanced point, then I begin to, as heaven consumes me, I then begin to live in this bubble, but only because I sit in the balance point. And I didn't make this up. Your experience, our experiences are similar because that's the way it works.
Right. I mean, yeah, for all of us to, have a similar understanding, even though we use different terminology, says that, it's like, you can't have millions of people having this experience and knowing that there's little point of consciousness. People always ask me, and I say, well, to me, all that exists is that void of creation, those potentialities, everything outside that is a mind construct for experience, is how I see it, so I'm just this itty bitty drop in this whole big thing. Yeah. And so, I think the more of us, that's why Spirit keeps telling me, speak your truth, that live in that authenticity, because when you do, it heals. And this is why I'm bringing this up, heals that initial incarnation wound, because then you realize I am you, you are me. There's this connective net of energy that makes it up. So, I'm very thankful that you were able to articulate that so beautifully. But so, I mean, as you found that and seen that, has that been healing for you?
Just exactly in the way you said it. It's the more I give away, the more I get.
Mm-hmm.
The more I give away. So in one of the visions that I had, I left out a vision for you guys. I was backpacking on the Appalachian Trail the year before I went to Montana, March break. So, all right. So whenever I had the chance, I was backpacking somewhere. Doesn't matter the season. So this particular year, I had this buddy of mine who's still a friend of mine. He is also an atheist, and he's a dear friend of mine. I get to hang out because I'm not a believer. I get to hang with atheists. So I had two visions when I was on the trail, and in both cases, the same angelic being came and took me out of my body in that space where you are almost asleep, when you're in this liminal passageway between waking and sleeping. It collected me and brought me up the proverbial, silver cord again, and same angelic bilocational being, and brought me into this sphere. But the sphere was the angelic being itself. And my first time in these two events, I had a light body, and I knew me. I could see me. My other self, my physical self. But I knew that my light body. I knew where I was. I knew this angelic being. I knew I was in the void, and the energy that is the divine void made me lift my light hands up in a cup, because they still have shape. They're cupped up, and I'm not willing this. I'm being willed. And as I'm being willed, the voice that has no sound speaks to me and shows me its hand. And in its hand, I can see a physical hand. There's a glass vial with a little black cap on the top, and in it is all this gold dust. And it's all super, like it's radiative gold dust. It's shining of its own light. And then it uncaps it, and it pours it into my hands. And as it pours it into this huge pile into my hands, like it's pouring and there's more coming out, that it's like a clown car. How many clowns can you get in the car? And it's just like pouring and pouring and pouring. And finally it stops and I get this mound in my palms and it does. Now give it away. And so then I'm back in my body again. And it was mine, like it was given to me. And now I'm back in my body again. I wake up, I fall back asleep again. Same thing happens. I'm raptured out of myself. And now I'm standing and a column of fire erupts. And this column of fire comes from outside of the sphere that I'm in. And it's wider than my physical body. And it erupts in kind of simultaneously, comes from below and above and inside. Now I'm a column of fire and I'm burning on the inside and the fire surrounds me. And I have this almost a feeling of fright. The thing about being in the divine heaven for me, as soon as I become self-aware, I get kicked out. And so I have this almost thought, and the voice intercedes and says, you will not be consumed. I will burn you, you will not be consumed. And I'm back in my body again. And so this idea of giving it away, Jesus talks about this. Others talk about this. The abundance of it isn't the accumulation of it for yourself. The abundance of it is the accumulation to share. And then I give you a gallon of, I go into my gold dust bucket, my barrel, and I scoop it out and I give you a gallon of it. And you've got a gallon, but by the time you've got your hands on it, it's a gallon and a half, and you give me half a gallon back. And by the time you hand it to me, it's a second gallon. And now I've got a whole gallon and you've got another whole gallon and we both got another whole gallon. And it's this worldwide web of light now. We are in a new, I hate to say this because, you know,
yeah,
we're in a new age. We have a potentiality here. It's not like it's going to happen on its own. It is doing its thing, and medical science is raising the dead. I love saying that. Medical science is creating an army of vocal mystics who are compelled by the light and the love to speak and be in our own authenticity and truth, to free the masses of metaphysical mystics who've experienced what they're not allowed to say, so that we can all recognize, A, that this is real, and B, that maybe we can steer humanity by the only thing that will ever save us from ourselves. You wonder, you know, all these, I follow AI, I follow a lot of technology. I have a tech head. And so I like tech. And so why is AI so much like us? Because it is us. Everything it knows, it's us. And what isn't us is our soul. Human-wise, I'm sorry, I should have stopped right there.
No, you know, what's interesting is, like, in my experiences and all the things that happen and how they refer to it, it's all in tech speak. It's source code, it's fiber optic, it's
You're the person I want to hear. Keep talking. Tell me.
No, but seriously, and like the divine portals, like they're like, when I connect with you, we're sharing this one timeline. You know, like, you know, to me, they've shown me like each person is creating their own timeline, but we have created this phase lock in this moment between our heart portal, you know, to have this conversation. And that's how we interact with each person. I mean, they've shown me all different things like this, or like when I do the healings and different things, you know, they show it in like fiber optics, you know, it looks like a lit up slinky, you know, and all these connections. But yeah, that's how I see it. But they call it source code, and they download these source codes to me and various things. So when you said you're tech head, I'm like, he's gonna get it, because everything they relate to me is like as if it were tech or AI. They even told me like this reality is Project Dreamscape. You know, they like, I get more of an AI type.
Yeah.
You know, but it's weird because it's that along with that whole mysticism you said, like it's like this two things. But they always say magic is what science, you know, hasn't figured out yet. You know what I mean, kind of thing. So
well, yeah. I think you're speaking my language. That's what I should say.
I thought
You're
so. I was
speaking
like,
my
oh,
language.
yes. So because the minute you said Matrix, I was like, okay, we got this.
I've been kind of backing off a little bit, only because of my own fear, but my fear of everybody identifies with the machine in the Matrix. when I say that, but the machine is benevolent. It's a benevolent machine. I love your source code, and I love your timeline portal lock, phase lock. This is
Yeah.
to me, this is brilliance, which you just okay. So
Okay.
this is
But that's how they, you know, things have been related to me and downloads that have come through or for me. So it's kind of interesting that way. But that's how, you know, they relate it to me and how each person interacts. Because I see everything now in vortexes and portal. So it's all like in and out and going through and out. But that's just kind of like I said, how they relate it to me. So I'm always interested how other people have seen it. You know, I have other people, like my higher fractal is a what they call a grid architect. And so that's the only reason, that's where I get all that terminology from. So I was just curious, have you seen anything, you know, you say we're in a new age, but for me, they've shown it as a new grid, a violet grid. So
sure.
I'm just curious,
That's
you
cool.
know,
I
how
experience it
it's
as a higher grid.
a higher grid. Yeah.
When I'm with other NDEs, like I was at the IANS conference and I was
Yeah.
sitting having coffee with somebody, and it's like I live in this heaven isn't just this bubble around me, it's that phase lock.
Hmm.
And it's like a dimension above,
Hmm.
or what did you call it? It was a purple, what did you say?
Oh, they showed me it's a violet grid because to heal the grid,
Violet
like my
grid.
other friend in her NTE, she was shown it was blue, which is the original grid they showed me on, was the blue grid. They showed me thousands of myself on this grid. And so, but for her, the one she had after that, it showed the grid breaking away and like the violet coming in to heal it. So now they keep showing me like the violet grid is in place. That's part of what the higher fractals are doing. You know, why they brought this light into here was that they show it as the violet grid, which violet is the healing, you know, light spectrum. So that makes sense to me.
100% makes sense to me.
Mhm.
I experienced that when I started this work that I'm working on now with this YouTube channel that I have. I was trying to do a couple different things. I was trying to find out if there were other people like me in the world, not just NDEers, but mystics, people who have had the mystical life, and
Mhm.
NDEers. And because I've experienced myself as a fiber optic cable,
I did.
that's how and with a diode at the end of it. And the diode is the expression, and I see everyone is like cabled in. And I experienced this connection that you described, this phase lock, as a connection between those two fiber optic cables, which go back to source.
Yes. Yep.
And that there's this other level of the web, this grid level. There's a grid level to it where when we phase lock with each other, it's like leaves a residual of some kind. And the residual is maybe the increase of the light inside of you and me while we're talking, where we both have this inflamement. I use a lot of the ancient language because that's my methodology, but it's also only metaphor. And I've wanted to be able to adapt it to the modern technological language, but I've been unable to do so because I don't have it. It's not natural to my tongue like it is to yours. But my experience of it is as you describe it. And I have this sense that the portal is and this grid is in place. And some of it has to do with, a lot of it has to do with humans technological evolution to the place of raising the dead. We're sending human beings not just into space and under the sea and their spacesuits and rocket ships. We're sending them into paradise and pulling them back. It's an interdimensional travel. And when you come back from this place, whether you go there through death or some other means, and there are other means, whether you, however it is you passage into and back, you are now a messenger in some level and connected to everyone else who is on the same grid as you. And now there's there's more of us than there's ever been. There's always
Mhm.
been NDEers, but there's so many more of us. And NDEers are supercharged. We're like, you have an after death communication, which is a piece of the diamond of the gold light itself. And it's all the same it is for me. And there's this radical equality I talked about. There's this radical equality of the humanity and this radical equality of the divine light itself. But the experience of the human being is an illumination that is demanding. I find it to be demanding. And in its demanding nature, I have little agency to resist its seductions. And I tried very pointedly, even in my pursuit, to also resist and to cling to myself, but I found it ultimately impossible. And once it finally, a non-attachment for me began in this transformative way, where the pipe opened up, and now this flow is more of me. And then I died again. And now,
It became
go
more
ahead.
of a pure light channel. I call it a light channel. A
It's a
divine
light, it's a light channel. I call it a light channel. That's
Yeah.
all I want to do is channel the light. And the more of us that channel the light, the more there is illumination for everybody.
Mhm.
And because it multiplies itself, the more everybody who has had other experiences see. I'm sorry. I'm
Oh, you're fine. I get like that too. Because they've shown me it's like a string of lights. You're turning on the next one, the next one. It's kind of like the ladder effect. You bring in the next one with you to the next higher frequency, the next higher frequency. It affects backwards, forwards, in all of these timelines. So I understand that perfectly, what you're saying. Do you find it like, I mean, I don't know if you call it, some people call it like this huge call to be of service. Like I get all these callings, like go to the store today. You have to be here, get this. And then it'll all line up and I'm in the right place, the right time to step in for a soul, and there's this almost moment where it's angelic, like we tested you lined up. You know what I mean? It's like, it's this weird kind of, you become more with the whole flow of how the divinity, intertwines itself. Do you find that you're called to do that a lot?
my whole I professionalized that. I was
Yes.
like, how am I gonna earn a living as this new person? Who's the closest?
Right.
Right. Oh, clergy. I got talked into it. Okay, I really did. But then I figured out how to do it. But that's exactly what it is. It's a life of humility,
Mhm.
a
Mhm.
life of listening to the divine direction. And it's not like it speaks to me, at least in a voice. It speaks to me in this data load of code
Yeah. Mhm.
that is all at once.
Yes. And you're like, oh, okay, now?
I'm
Yes, now.
like, I'm like,
All
yeah.
right.
Can I refuse? Yes. Yes, you can. You can refuse. Like
It's
passive
not
aggressive or
comfortable.
what?
Yeah. It's like, yeah, but what will that bring me? But like I feel
Exactly.
right. And like my third death experience was like, you've done enough now. You can stay. And I'm like, no, no. I came back for love. Like you came back for your parents. I came back for my daughter. I had died on her in a previous life, same time, same age. So I get it. But they're like, as far as having this thing where I'm like, no, I want to get some more on my docket. I want to leave with a higher scale of, like I want it, and
Bodhisattva.
yeah. So it's like, okay, so, and there was always like the risk, but as far as like, am I going to fall back asleep? Am I like create more of the low, like how's that going to play out? But
So how did you handle that?
how
How
did I
did you
handle?
handle not falling back asleep?
Oh, well, my first one was at 7. So my next one was at 28. That was just for healing. So between 35 and the other one was 2 years ago. I came in and out a little bit. I was a lot kinder, nicer, understanding. I could see people. I had the same issue with you, like you kind of, or I call it like you see everybody as this beautiful, glowing being, and you get bombarded with a lot of hurt, a lot of suffering, because you're like, you trust them, you give to them, you feed energy, and then all of a sudden it's like a big bang boom. So it's only been like, it's weird. My mom had a vision before she died where I would live. And I kept saying for like 6 years, didn't know nobody there. So anyway, once I moved here 4 years ago, it's just been nonstop. It's kind of like 2012, to 2014, there was this really high state, and then it went back. And then like since 2018, it's been like, like you can't, you're in the light. You don't know any other way to connect
Right.
or be or
Yeah.
understand the world. Like you can't unsee it once you see it for the energetic thing
Yeah.
that it is, And so for me, it was a matter of, like I was saying, and you said about going within. I'm always like, I'm just a remembrance guide. I don't heal anyone. I help you remember your own divinity.
That's
That's
what I
it.
do.
Yes.
That's
Yeah,
it. Because
that's
that's the
it.
underlying ailment.
Yes. Yeah. To remember that you are all that is. And when I do my things and I connect these fractals and I open
Mm.
these portals and I do all these things, but that's just so their consciousness connects to everything that they are.
Hey, can you on
That's what I walk with.
can some Sunday morning come to Mystic Tea Salon?
What you have a thing on
I've got a
Sunday?
thing on Sunday morning. So I'd started this channel on YouTube to use as a funnel to Mystic Tea Salon to find mystics from around the world. And so we have a collection of mystics, and our rules are humility, compassion, and kindness, and experience. And I would love to hear you come some Sunday and talk about yourself and talk
Okay.
about your experience and use your language, because language formation, and we're trying to there are historical languages of mystical experience. There's the Upanishads and the Vedas and Lao Tzu and Rumi and Jesus and all these people. But we need to like find a language that's uh inclusive.
Yeah. And what's interesting is Spirit even told me that. Like, and people that read my energy are like, you can move your energy to wherever to match these, no matter where somebody is at. It's like a fluctuation. It's almost, my friend called it being a mutant. Like I can mutate the energy. You know what I'm saying?
You meet them
And I
where they
think you get
are.
it. Yes,
That's
you
what
have.
Paul was talking about. He's
Yes.
talking about you meet people where they are. He's not just talking about intellectually, he's talking about energetically.
And so much, if you look at like the Bible and various things like that, it's all, and which explains my love for that double entendre type thing. Like it's all you too. Because I wanted to be an English major too, so yeah, we got that going. But it's that understanding. I forget. I'm reading a book about Jesus and the Lost Goddess. I don't usually read books, but my friend said check this out. But I only read the premise. I'm so terrible, but it's literally how that whole religion moved into literalism,
Yeah.
when it was all mysticism and analogy and it's kind of like you had to read the code, because my fourth death experience was all about how words are these light codes,
They are.
and your thoughts and intentions. So trying to get those, like your voice literally can heal, can send
Mm.
that code,
Mhm.
and so that's why it's so important to speak that truth, and
Mm.
however is authentic to you. You know, it's embodying that energy rather than what I call parroting spirituality. You know what I mean? It's an embodiment, or you're in order to carry that through. These are the kinds of conversations I want on my channel. I want people to understand, we can understand our experiences, that gives them a background, but where does it take you? Where is it giving back? Where is that interconnection? Where can you relate to me and you? Where can you feel our heart center? You know, you and I speak from that heart center, where people can sense that humility, that connection, but when you get too intellectual in your head instead of your heart, it's not reaching where it can go. It's not creating that web. So, I love that you speak from that space and it's authentic to you. So I'm so thankful that you came to speak with me today. And I mean, there's just so much that I feel that you understand in that whole matrix. So that's awesome.
I think we speak heart to heart.
Part. Yeah. Yeah.
I
And,
Go ahead.
in speaking all of that, what would you say to those that are just finding themselves, like they're literally there's so much light energy right now that it is cracking people open. They were this coal and now they're breaking that shell into this diamond, is how I see it. And so what would you say is, like, other than going within, because we both talked about that, is like an important key to that transformation?
Pursuit. You have to pursue it. And I came back with an NDE, and you did too, and you pursued the same singleness that I pursued. You pursued it. It can exist on its own. It doesn't need you. It exists. You exist already because of it. And so it doesn't need you to become an ember inside of you. But if you do want to blow on that ember, you can blow on it. And the more you blow on the ember, the hotter it becomes, the more it ignites the charcoal around it, the dark parts of yourself. And pretty soon you build a blaze inside yourself. And I'm this isn't me parroting, like you just said.
No.
I chose to live this in secret for 40 years until now. I'm only now talking about this because I wasn't ready to talk about it before, because I had to find out whether Patanjali and Yogananda, when they promised me that that this thing that I lost, I could regain in this world through the stripping of myself and the pursuit of the oneness. I wanted that to be true. And so I pursued it, even as I was reluctant, the most reluctant person to be in the situation in my first place, even though I chose to come back. Talk about continuing to be yourself.
Stubborn. I've noticed most of us are stubborn.
I am wicked stubborn.
Yeah.
I'm like, about this in particular,
Yeah.
about the clinging to my own self. Thank you very much. But it turns out that the more I practiced my breath, each time that I stepped aside, even in my anger, I would step aside, and in this place I would find the peace and multiply myself. And create this larger and larger space and this receptacle, and then I would dispense this receptacle with the content of the receptacle during my day, during my work day as a minister, as working with the grieving and the dying and the thieves and murderers and board members and all this, and
I love the board member eye roll. I know what that feels like. Yeah.
But always able to refill myself, to dispense the light that I was centered in. And then I would run out at the end of the day and I'd have to refill myself. So it's this constant practice of refilling, but with each refillment, more of the self is gone. With each single breath, when there is no, if you're a chanter and you're breathing and where your chant and your breath align and there's only focus, that's a grain of sand. Then the prayer falls away and you're left with only breath and focus. That's 3 grains of sand, and it goes on like that until it teaches you itself. That's the other thing. If you go into your energetic body, if you learn to live inside, it becomes your teacher. It's not platitude to say that this thing is inside you. It is you, and it will teach you. I don't have, I'm a fan of Jesus, but I'm also like a big fan of Lao Tzu and Rumi and all these other people, because they're all teaching the same thing. I have a guru. I only have one guru, and it is the divine light itself.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yes.
I knew you were going to know what I'm talking about. I knew it. It knows itself.
Yes. Because, and that's where I tell people to go to within. Find that divine guru within. I mean, I can't stress that enough. I see a lot of people follow, and teachings are okay because, they crack that mind construct open just a little bit more. And then you start to have more and more experiences. This whole thing that I told you about that we have is the celebration of consciousness. And Spirit gave me that whole download for the principle of getting people in touch with that energy, to sit in that flow, because how energy, it matches, it starts to vibrate and it all, right. So in that flow, they can start to feel that, because I've found even, because I do sharing groups with IANS and SAI, that the more people are in contact with that energy, they start to have more expansive experience,
Like attracts
like.
like.
That's the whole point. Yes.
That is I'm so happy to hear you out there doing your thing.
I'm doing it the best I can.
That's all we can do.
Spirit's been a big kick, and like you said, it's like an ice thing. Go forward. I'm like, okay, I'm just going. It's kind of like, being pushed down the hill and no training wheels on your bike. My brother did that to me, but boy, did I learn fast, right? Well, until I hit the side of the shed. I managed to keep it upright. And that's kind of how navigating life with spiritual aspects is like.
I agree. I do.
There goes my daisy seat and my
That's right.
Basket on the front, but yeah, I find it's really interesting and to hear how others navigate it. I think that's more, the things that need to be talked about.
I agree.
It's not easy because you literally have to look at all those reflections inside of you first before you get to that divine core, because it is like you said, they show it to me like a closed lotus, and they show my modality as the lotus opening, in this violet light. But each of those layers, you have to be willing to face that mirror. And I think that's why so many people turn away from that aspect. They want somebody else to tell them or to guide them. But, like how we say as healers, I can, it's just a Band-Aid. I tell people, you have to look and do that. You have to cleanse that slate. And I mean, I'm just saying to find
No, I'm
yours.
with you.
So
I'm 100% with you. It's the you don't have to do it.
you don't.
But,
That's a
but
choice.
but if you do it, this is what you get.
And nobody says that's easy either. I mean, because you still have to walk that fine line of being human versus understanding all that is.
It's a blessing and a curse.
Yes. I mean, I mean, I don't like to say it's a curse because to me it's like a gift, but
it's also a blessing.
Yes. The responsibility and accountability of it, because they stress to me sovereignty,
sovereignty.
of each person's timeline.
Me too. And you're say more.
Yeah.
About sovereignty of that.
Sovereignty of timelines, because some of what we experience is timeline bleeds and other dimensional things, but the mind your timeline is, they yell at me all the time, mind your timeline, because it's not my job, it's not my path to do anything outside of myself as far as what is going on with other people. They are a reflection of me. So as long as I'm going within and minding my own timeline, I'm healing everything outside of it.
Yep.
But when I get too entranced with trying to, that person's going through all this and and these things, granted, everyone's a reflection of me, so they are helping me heal, but I'm not you're not minding your own timeline. You're putting your energy outside of yourself everywhere in all these fractalizations. So to me, it's kind of like, if I heal within, everything they showed me without will heal. So, if everything is, I won't get in all my experiences because this is about you, but this whole thing of, they told me it's a godling's game of smoke and mirrors. So it's all fractalizations of source, learning different emotions and learning themselves through all of these reflections. So when you take away all the, like it's like that carnival mirror system, right? When you take all those away, it's just you standing there.
That's exactly how I see it.
The best, really. So being the best you is
said in your language.
Yeah. But
being the best you is what?
Well, you know how they say that, how do I heal the world? What do I do that'll best bring in this new age, this new whatever? And to me, it's all, it's not selfish. It's learning self.
Yeah.
Know thyself, know thy own frequency is how they say, know your frequency to me. But, that's how you can be the best you and move the collective forward, by doing your own work. Not putting it off on everybody else. That they stress to me like how much expectations and like, you're my father, you're my mother, you're my boss, how we put people and lock them in these cages you were talking about, because we have that idea, we put that energy around them in our storyline, and that's not respecting their sovereignty.
That's exactly.
They're just human. If you go outside the fact that when you get that 360 view, they're no longer your husband, your wife, your whatever, and you see what's making them tick, and you're like, I caused all that because they wanted, they wanted this, and that's not them, and this is what they wanted, and they're just trying to please me so they don't have that energetic gunk going back and forth. Anyway, so that's just how I see reality now. So I try to stay in my own lane. I call it my own timeline. And just do my best by I just send love as I move through it. And that's not toxic positivity. Some people try to say that, like, you're not acknowledging all the horrors in the world. Yes, I am, but I know healing, it starts with me,
Yeah, same thing
nobody
here
else.
too. Right.
Yeah.
I stick to my, I have, how do I, this, the state of non-attachment is
Yes.
what you're describing, and being a witness. But the reason you get to be a witness is because you are aimed at your own one being. And so then I try to only bring love where I can. The reality of suffering is obvious in my life. It's all around me, in my neighborhood, in my family, and in the world. But I can't fix all of that. I've spent my life in service, helping people as a minister. That's my job, was to help put band-aids on everything that I could. And but the self itself is it's the original thing that needs to be healed. And when that happens, you're still human, you still feel emotions and grieve for people, but you know that none of it's real. And that becomes the paradigm.
Mhm.
And it's not unreal, like, oh shit, we can do anything we want.
Right. Yeah. It's not Grand Theft Auto. There's another layer to
It's
that.
not that at all. It's not that at all.
There is
It's
another layer way down there. You can go play there. Go ahead.
yeah, yeah, right, right. Yeah. The I'm so glad to hear that you're out there doing the same thing I am. I didn't know when I started this job whether I'd actually run into people out there doing the same thing I am. But there
Same.
you are.
Here we are.
Here we are. All these
Beautiful.
part of this web,
Yep.
all having been transformed involuntarily, although I know that I made deals. I just don't remember. I know that I made deals.
Peter, you shouldn't have been such a wheeler and dealer.
I know I should not have. I don't remember. I didn't read the fine contract.
Your charisma. I'll do this for you if you do this for me in this lifetime. I'll do this for you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Shine on, shine on. Yeah,
Yeah. As we say on my channel, light it up.
light it up.
Light it up. Yeah.
Me, that's, I love it. I'm so glad you have your channel. I'm so glad you invited me on. I'm so glad to meet you. So glad. I'd love to hear more about you and what you're doing and how
Yeah,
you're
and
doing
I
it.
would love to do that Sunday thing. That sounds amazing. Just like I said, our celebration of consciousness is on the first Sunday of the month. Other than that, I'm good.
Right. Oh, yeah. I think,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that
that's
was the
always
reason
good.
why I couldn't meet you live.
Yes, 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 yes.
That's a bummer, but that's great that you're out there doing it anyway.
Spirit's like, there needs to be a lot more of you, and that's what I say. There's abundance for everyone, and that we're all doing these same or similar things, because people will resonate with you that may not resonate with me, or they'll find us all. There's always that space of abundance. And I
Mhm.
think that's very important. And I think you speak this too, for the world to see that there's no competition. We are all one. That abundance is there for everyone. And the more we lift each other's projects and beings up in that divine light,
We all
the
win.
more beautiful, like Eden's always been here, they tell me. It's just a matter of matching that mentality, that
It's always
frequency.
been here.
Yes.
It's still here. That's what we're
Yeah.
talking about.
Yeah.
And I lived on this island and off the coast of Maine, and on this island was a famous art and craft school, all world renowned. And there was a lot of crafters and artisans on the island, and there's a bunch of quilters, and there was a whole bunch of quilters, and they all had a shop. And so there was competition among the quilters. And then one day, one of the quilters said, I'm down in the harbor watching the lobster boats on their moorings swing and rise in the tide together. And I realized that maybe we should form a collective of advertisement. And they started a collective to market the island as a place to come for quilters. And they all won.
Yeah.
And
And
that's what
that's what
that's where I'm at.
Yep.
And so and not only that, this is much bigger than you and me. It's I feel like if there was ever a conspiracy, Peter Panagore and his conspiracy theory, it's medical science, it's science and technology working with the divine to create mystics all over the world. It's like the Tower of Babel. We finally built this thing. And is it the divine plan? It certainly seems to be impacting
Mm-hmm.
the
Well,
world.
to awaken people to what they truly are has been the divine plan, at least what they show me through like source code, which is like
Mhm.
they said in my Beyond Quantum Hypnosis, they said I was love and that I was a part of creation. Like it takes, like the elementals aren't the earth elementals we think of, but the elements of emotion, that's what it takes to create. And that I was the emotion of love, but that love put
Mm.
all these fractals throughout all the grid to raise the vibration to heal, because she always meant for it to be that Eden,
Yeah,
and
right.
that's what I was shown. So,
Mm.
I feel like it's just all of us fractals being activated, you know, it's a divine plan.
Amen.
I love it. And my fourth experience, I was like, I spent how many, they showed me that I've been here since, creation, right? Like when Earth was a thought form. And they're like, I'm like, I did too much work, too many lifetimes, too many agreements to miss what's coming. Have you seen that? We can end it with that. Have you seen like how this whole new like light? And they told me it's more like activating, more like a symbiotic thing between your light divine body and your physical body, so
Yeah.
that you can be this multidimensional being.
Which is what we're being right now.
Yes,
You and I, we are
exactly.
doing that now.
Yes. And that's what I'm saying, that remembrance, that ability, is what I was shown is how we are to, they talk about the big ascension and these various things. So I just wanted your take on it, because my take on it is that like it's a shift in consciousness and
It
awareness.
is. That's the only way humanity is ever going to heal itself. And I'm hoping that we have enough juice among us to nudge societies, because there are counter forces to this, and we see them warring and threats of war and rattling of nuclear weapons, and that old self of humanity clings unto itself societally. So I see the light and I see the future, but I see some. Uh, might not be a simple, easy path, but I see that the only thing that can heal us is this. And there's more of us than ever that have been before in the history of the world, and we're all talking to each other. We can nudge this. I don't know if you've ever heard of the talking about how you get nudged. So when you
Yeah.
go to a website and they have you opted in for the newsletter, and you have to opt out, that's a nudge. And so we have the opportunity to nudge, because we're in the positive position here. First time we've been in really the biggest positive position we've ever had. When I'm
Well,
saying
yeah.
we, because we are the light.
Hmm. And I was shown literally, people talk about, and I don't know your theories on this, but they literally showed me like not every consciousness is necessarily here the same way right now. That's why there's an abundance of people, because literally all these higher frequency light beings, so to speak, have come into the grid to be like the powerhouse to shift the
Mm.
consciousness, to have that, for source to use that energy to move it forward. So I think that's where we find so many right now that are aware and being born aware. Like if you notice the newer generations, like my children are so aware. I'm like, whoa, So, to bring that understanding, because it's kind of like that whole resonance thing. If there's that many on that frequency, you're tipping that scale, the scales of fate, right? Because you're literally like weighting the team, like how you get the big Russian guy for your football team. You're weighting the team, if that makes
You're
sense.
sending in the ringers.
Yes,
You're bringing in the
exactly.
pros to the amateur level. So,
Yeah,
so that
kind of
makes me,
like that.
it makes me think that you are one of us.
Well, I was literally shown that I literally I chose this timeline because that was that thing I was telling you when I was getting pulled out of body, that I came
Mm.
back to this particular timeline because I said my loved ones are still unaware.
Me,
I
me
can't leave
too.
them
I
there.
came
You
back.
did too?
Well, I
Okay.
came back because the first time for my parents, and the second time, my daughter was leaving a post-war marriage that provided damage to the Marine, and I had a child, and who was going to be there. So I chose I chose their timeline. I was like, I'm picking here. I'm going
Yeah.
here, going back, for the sake of, and she just turned 8. She was a year old, not even a year old when all this happened.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, because my husband's like, what? And I'm like, well, because, they showed me that. I'm like, no, I'm not going to leave them there. They're like, you could leave,
Yeah. It's
you can
cool by
leave
me.
if you
If
want
you
to,
go, you
but
come
these
back.
people don't know what you know now. It's like, it was kind of
Right.
like you graduated, but these guys don't know this yet. And that's literally, yeah. And that was just like 2 weeks ago that they were showing me this. I'm like, okay, let's go. All right. No, that was, yeah. Yeah. That one was a month ago. And then I had another thing 2 weeks ago. But it's kind of like, it's so interesting, like, that awareness that we're multidimensional and we have these choices. So many people feel
Right.
like so locked in. And I
Yeah.
think that's why our messages are so important, you know.
Unlock
But
yourself.
yeah, quite literally. That should be
Hmm.
our new slogan, Peter.
Unlock yourself.
I say light it up, but yeah, unlock that cage,
Yeah.
I don't know. And I think fear stops some people because they're like, I just came here for the earth experience. I hear that from some people, like, I just came for this.
Yeah.
I'm
Me
like, and
too.
I respect that.
Yeah,
That's
sure. Go
sovereignty.
ahead. That's really cool. You do you is what I think, which is fine
You
because it's
do.
all eternal nature.
Yes, yes, yes.
What were you going to
Some
say?
of us are curious. That's why we're like cats with 9 lives, right? Curiosity in the cat. But I think it's however much you want to expand. It's like going to college. How much, do you want to
Yeah.
get a doctorate? Do you want to do
Right.
not in this lifetime?
Well, I have seen myself as not a human traveling multidimensionally, layer by layer. More of my light self gets stripped away, dimension by dimension, heaven by heaven, as I get closer and closer to the radiance, to the frequency, to the music, and there's an evolution of myself that's occurring simultaneous to my evolution here, but it also occurs when I'm not here. It's
Yes.
there's this advancement of my own self toward the light as more of me is sloughed off by the light.
Yep.
And at every level, as I was being brought through this experience, I felt as if I had reached the penultimate. I felt like I had reached the center of it, and yet there was light always beyond. And in each new level, I then felt again like I had reached the new penultimate. And it just never, ever. And the closer I got to it, the further it receded from me,
Mhm.
and the stronger it became in me,
Yeah.
always more.
Do you know, from what they've shown me from like what I call the soul cloud work I do, is like there's this collection of personality complexes, different characteristics and things that make up the person. So I think as that light, you lose some of that. You're always core personality sort of, but but those things kind of fall away, and you embody more of like the mystic knowledge, like this is how it all flows, this is how I make things flow in my reality. But what I call, they show me that
I see.
like
I
all
see.
the all these, yeah, all these energies come into being and they're using you. You're like a crystal on the grid. So they're doing the divine work. You're this pure channel that is constantly going like this, and they're working out all the different things that they know, or aiding you on what you wanted to achieve, or working out their own things, because it's easier in this physical, being in the physical, to clear and work through those energies than it is on what we call the other side. So they show it to me as this huge personality complex, a collection of those, because there's like prime source, then this thing, and
Mm.
then this
I see what you're
collection
saying.
of
I
of,
see what you're saying.
of yeah, of these understandings that you brought with you for this particular incarnation storyline, And so I found with NDEs, and I'm not sure with yours, that like I pulled in higher frequencies after each one, from that, the more ascended, you might say, understanding from that cloud, as I've moved through my spiritual path. So I keep expanding in that way, that it increases my frequency to, you know, pull things to my higher timeline, to help trigger awakenings and different things with that. And I didn't know if I had to explain it a little bit first, so bear with me. But have you found that as well when you're working, like in connecting with people? Like, Source showed me, like, I carry a key, like you have a key code. It's a code. Each one of us that came back carries a different code, kind of like an upgrade. And I didn't know if you had a similar thing where all some people are like, they don't get it, and all of a sudden they're like, it's like this light bulb. You see it go on inside their vision. It's like, Okay. It's connected. And I just didn't know how you experienced that.
as you describe it in different language.
Okay.
And so the every time I'm taken in a transcendent mystical experience I'm always carried by the divine light, and it's it's a different heaven. I go to a different heaven every time. And
Yeah.
in these different heavens, I learn these different lessons. And it's not like a different heaven, like I'm in Toledo and then I'm in Honolulu. It's not like that. It's like a total different reality. I'm in the ocean of music. I'm in the cosmos. Neither they're all interwoven, but also somehow different. And in each one of these, I I find more of myself. I understand more of my original self by losing myself. All these parts of me, these layers of me get sloughed off. And then when I come back into this physical world, there's a residual, there's a radiance, there's an avenue, there's an opening, there's a guide, there's a doorway, there's a portal that if I bring it, it overlaps like a Venn diagram, every other one of my mystical experiences. They all sort of become this focal point, but they are all separate with these overlaps. And if I bring them all, if I bring them individually into my consciousness with a focused attention, they become portals back into that experience, not in the totality of it, but in the divine feeling of it. I see, I taste, I feel that part of me that is beyond my filter here. And then in this collective, they all become this individuated channel that is representative of my experience as a mystic here. Every mystic in the history of the world is different than every mystic in the history of the world. Every one of them is. Why would NDEers be any different? We're not. And what we all come to is the singleness. There's this singleness of being, and this is, it is this, would you say, the singularity?
Yeah, divine singularity.
The
Yeah.
divine singularity. Exactly. That's what is, and that's what is
Mhm.
isness, is being. And so I went on that riff to say that everything you say, in different language, because I'm working through the ancient languages of religion, and there's a language for this in religion. It's like all these saints, the Catholic saints become heavens for me, and they they whisper their truths that they've told me on the other side here, and which is super similar to what you're talking about.
Yes.
And there was that other thing you were saying about not just this multidimensionality and these guides and this wisdom that comes back with you, that it increases your capacity for it. And the more the more you have of it, this is its blessing. The more you have of it, the more. Jesus talked about this. The give to the one who has much, more will be given. And so there's this more that's given, and the abundance of it is the possibility of sharing it. And the more you share of it, the more abundant you become, and the more sensitive you become. I was like, you, no, I should only talk about what happened to me because it's the only place I know. And so the more I share of it, the thinner my veil becomes. The more I center into myself, the thinner my veil becomes. The more I have a flag. I'm going to find a flag on my desk. Here's my flag. The more I have a flag to wave to the divine, radiating the frequency, consolidating my own fractals into the singularity, radiating my flag saying, see me, but not doing it in a demanding way, just by being in it. And by being in it, then it's like attracts like, and then these mystical things happen to me.
Yes. You clarified something in the way you're describing it. They kind of clicked in. Is that I do this work where I see where each of their energies through their own timeline, and then all the others, fractionated. And when you said that, so that's why it's so stressing in that, doing that ancestral trauma healing and those other healings, because it's getting you back to that singularity, that timeline of yourself, instead of all these fractionalizations of it.
This laser beam that I came back, that I could have chosen, was the center point of all these fractals. I see this in my mind like a flower, all these petal doors going out, and in the center is the center of the flower, but the flower center is this laser light, and it's all coming out to all these other fractal places. And so I've been weaving my way back. I discovered this one thing for myself, that the more I lean into the light, the closer I get to my original self. And and whether I'm making a good decision or a bad decision, a healthy decision or a poor decision, a left-hand turn or a right-hand turn, as long as I'm aiming myself at the light, that's my trajectory. Whether I, and so, and in terms of my single timeline of my life, sounds the same as yours, in that the stronger I become inside the timeline of my own life, the more I'm able, with humility, to be present in the lives of the people that I love, whose worlds are leaning, and so as I treat them with kindness, I bring them into the kindness timeline. I bring them into the love timeline, if only in that second, and then they perpetuate that. There's those commercials, where there's a plot falling and somebody shoves somebody out of the way, and then this person does something for someone else, and pretty soon they're all in the same timeline. They're all in the same love line. They're all in the same light line. And so you said the same thing.
You know what I find interesting, and I've noticed the switch in just for people, and I want to just clarify if you do too, like when I was talking about expectations and things, like if you've had this, like a certain kind of a relationship with the person, every time you go to deal with them, that comes up first. Like the minute you have one trauma with them or anything else, so you have that you come into it with that frequency, expecting it. And of course, they're going to match it. So you're just going to keep recreating that pattern. But when you find it with kindness, like, oh, they were just reacting because they were hurt, they had a bad day, they had whatever, the 360 view, it totally changes their personality and how they reflect back at you. And we don't realize how much we set ourselves up for that kind of, suffering or whatever it is, this dissonance, by without living in that, what we call, people like to say, the now moment. But if you're looking back who they were or what they were, that's exactly when you're looking back at that, you know what I mean?
You only see yourself. You only
Yeah.
see, you only see your pain. You only see the superficial layer of who you actually aren't. And so it becomes reflective, and its power is in its reflectivity. And so when part of the stepping aside of self is the stepping aside from the self of the other.
Yep.
And not being, when there is nobody here, I can't be hurt. The Karate Kid, where at the end of the first one, where he's got the drum and he's like beating the drum, and the arms are swinging, and he's getting out of the way. There's no self to hit there. You can't be hit. It can't be hit. And that it really frustrates your opponent when there's no one there to push you, especially narcissists. If there's nobody to push against, they have no control.
It becomes a spiral. They just their whole mask drops, you might say.
Yeah, their whole mask drops.
I've seen that many, many times. I swear that's kind of, I call it my superpower.
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm very hard to offend. I'm very hard to offend. I could be wounded. I'm not impenetrable. I could be wounded.
Right. But I try not to take anything personal. I get into a conversation. It's like, everything, I get those things now, like everything's the small stuff, because it is. You don't have to attach to any of it.
Exactly. Everything's a small step, one after the other, one door after the other, one portal after the other, one connection after the other, one leaning into the light after the other, one breath after the other, one centering after the other. Creates a lifetime.
Yeah. So is there anything else you want to share or talk about before we kind of fade away off the radar?
Pleased to meet you. Pleased to meet you, Lorelei. I really am.
You as well.
I do individual counseling. People can talk to me. I have an open door. Go to my website, peterpanagore.love. I love to help people like you do on their journey, and to help you find yourself, which is exactly what you do, Lorelei. And
it's a beautiful journey and gift.
It is. So that's to come visit me at peterpanagore.love, and go visit Lorelei's channel, and go to listen to lots of NDEs, but most of all, seek love and light within yourself, and you're sure never to be lost.
Love thyself. It's not selfish. Thank you so much for being here with me today, Peter, and letting me get to know you and feel your energy and just be in the space with you. Thank you, everyone that's joining to watch this. We appreciate you and sending so much love out into the universe. Thank you again.
Peace and love, everybody.